Now, your weather forecast from the forecasters at 91.3 WCRD.
Good Wednesday evening, weather forecaster Balance LeVar here. Current time 4:24 in the afternoon. Temperatures in Muncie sitting at 57 degrees. We saw a lot of sunshine earlier throughout the day. The clouds have started to roll on in. We're going to see rain chances increase through the evening hours. A 60% chance for showers into the evening hours. Don't expect a washout. Isolated storms possible and light rain throughout the region. We'll see temperatures overnight drop down to a low of 30 degrees and some snow is possible through the overnight hours, lasting through 6 a.m. tomorrow morning. Accumulation not expected to surpass anything apart from a light dusting at most. Make sure to give us a follow on Twitter at WCRDWX for daily weather updates.
Today's weather forecast was brought to you by Ball State's online education. Summer class signups are now open.
Good evening and welcome to the penultimate edition of the Fantasy Express for the 2017-2018 school year. I'm your host, Steven Sobek, and I'm joined by both Robert Segovia and Blake the Hound Dog Dollier tonight. How are we doing?
Well, I'm doing pretty well. It's a little chilly outside. I don't know what's going on with the weather. How about you, Blake?
I'm doing pretty well also. I can't help but be a little down with this weather myself. The clouds, the gloom and doom, but I heard later on in the week it might clear up, so fingers crossed that happens there.
Absolutely, and it's nice to have everybody in the studio at the same time. We've been kind of winging it the last few weeks as finals start to approach us and the end of the school year. So, but we are all here, and we have quite the full slate tonight. We're going to talk NBA playoffs. And hopefully at the end of the show, a little MLB. So let's get right to it. First matchup we're going to talk about is the Wizards and the Raptors. That series has already completed 2 games, and the Raptors took both of them at home. Robert, I know you've got quite a lot to say about this matchup, so let's get right to it.
Well, I mean, the Raptors dominated John Wall, Bradley Beal, and the Wizards. John Wall had another great game, 29 points and 9 assists, but really Toronto was the major factor, mostly because of Kyle Lowry and DeMar DeRozan. DeRozan with 37 points, Lowry with 13 points and 12 assists, helping out DeMar, and I think the Raptors are a legit contender. Do you guys see them as the dominant force out of the East?
I do, and especially after seeing that last Cleveland game against Indiana, you really don't know where their heart and soul of that team really is. And another thing I'll mention about that Raptors series, and granted, you also have to thank the Celtics with Kyrie's injury, but when it comes to that series, you're really starting to see who the best duo in the NBA is in the Eastern Conference with, Kyle Lowry, DeMar DeRozan versus John Wall and Bradley Beal. That's being revealed to us through this playoff series thus far and doesn't appear to be changing.
Yeah, we're learning a lot about Toronto. And through these first 2 games, I mean, both Lowry and DeRozan put a lot of pressure on themselves going into Game 1, stating that, hey, we're treating this like Game 7. That's rare for a 1 seed to be saying that about an 8 seed matchup. So it shows that Toronto's not taking their seed for granted, at least in my opinion. And really shows that maybe the leaders on that team have matured a little bit. And it shows in the numbers. Game 1, DeRozan and Lowry, I believe they combined for 7 points in the first half. You can't do that. Washington was up at halftime. But then in the second half, they came on a little bit. DeRozan finished with 17, Lowry with 11, but the bench contributed 42 points in that effort.
Yeah, I mean, Toronto is really getting Lowry and DeRozan to contribute to the other players on the team, and that's what's changing this series versus past series that the Raptors have been in previous years. I mean, Toronto gets the high seeding pretty much every year, home court advantage, but it's Lowry and DeRozan that kind of take isolation from the other members on the team and try and do it themselves. But really, they're trying to involve everybody, and that's really the difference this year.
Definitely the team chemistry is one of the best in the league. And with the bench, Jakob Poeltl, he's proven to play pretty well. But I think overall, what speaks to the success of the Raptors is the maturity of their stars, Kyle Lowry and DeMar DeRozan, having some struggles in the early parts of their career in the playoffs, but they're really seeming to get that together and really get a nice flow going. So if they can continue that, the sky's the limit, and they're going to go really far, really deep into these playoffs.
They were something like 0 for 8 or 0 for 9 in the first game of opening round playoff series, and so they finally got that big win. And then in game 2, they came out. The bench also contributed 42 points, same as the first game, but DeRozan's numbers were up and Lowry's numbers were up. DeRozan had 37. So, do you think that the balance that they've found in game 2 is something that they need to try and repeat, or do you think game 1 was good enough, at least for this series, Robert?
Well, I think that the balance is something that will help in further series. So I feel like taking that to the Wizards in this first round matchup will be really important for later contests.
I think that when it comes to the flow, and like they always say, it's really working. So if it's not broke, why fix it? I mean, if Toronto can keep this energy up and keep the team chemistry working to their advantage, I don't see any changes in the near future, and I don't think they should really alter anything.
Well, something that's, speaking of broken, the Milwaukee Bucks have to be heartbroken after a Game 1 overtime loss in Boston, where they seem to be competing with the Celtics throughout the entire game. And then Terry Rozier hits that clutch three-pointer at the end. But Chris Middleton somehow responded with 0.5 seconds to go, sunk one at the buzzer to tie the game. But eventually the Bucks lost in overtime. And then Boston just the other night won 120-106. Now the Bucks are in a 2-0 hole. What's the response from Milwaukee at this point? And what does Giannis Antetokounmpo have to do? I'm glad I got that pronunciation right. Giannis, what does he have to do to get his team going again?
That's the thing. The Greek Freak has been playing phenomenally. 30 points, 9 rebounds, and 8 assists in that previous game. And I feel like the Bucks they're not going to beat the Celtics in this series. I see that they haven't really been playing in their hearts out this series, and I don't know what's going on because the Bucks look to be one of the stronger teams going into the playoffs this season.
I think when it comes to the Bucks, Giannis Antetokounmpo, he obviously is the best player on their team, and he's what's carrying them as far as they've gotten, but it really boils down to him needing help. And with Chris Middleton, yes, he played well yesterday, and they do have Eric Bledsoe, but where are these guys when it boils down to it? Where are they in crunch time? To me, I just see Antetokounmpo being the only one that really has the fight in him, and I think he needs some help out there.
Right, and Blake, I mean, definitely the names are there. I mean, on the roster, they loaded up. Eric Bledsoe from Phoenix brings a ton of experience at the point guard position for them, but again, down the stretch in games, I mean, Giannis is putting up 30, and they're not beating Boston, who doesn't have, I mean, they haven't had Hayward all year, but they don't have Kyrie now. And there's discussion about, well, is Terry Rozier filling that role? Was this guy sitting on the bench almost in a Kyrie in waiting role? And now he's getting to shine, and same with Jaylen Brown. Jason Tatum, he's a rookie. He does not look like a rookie out on the court. And I feel as though this is really frustrating for Milwaukee, getting a matchup where, yes, they're the lower seed. They don't have the home court. But you have to think that they're right there on paper. They should be competing with the Celtics, and arguably they have the more experience at this point.
And the Celtics get a lot of contribution from all the players on their team. Like you said, they don't need a Kyrie. They don't need
Gordon Hayward. Yeah, you're right.
And Jaylen Brown had 30 points. Terry Rozier had 23 points and 8 assists. But Bucks guard Eric Bledsoe was asked about his matchup with Terry Rozier, and a reporter asked him if he thought a lot about that matchup, and Bledsoe responded asking who Rozier was, even though he scored 23 points in 2 straight games. What do you guys think about that?
Well, I kind of think of the LeBron James, Lance Stevenson situation. They go back and forth. They're like Tom and Jerry out there. And so maybe this is trash talk from Eric Bledsoe, or does he really not know who Terry Rozier is? I mean, what do you guys think?
Well, see, for me, I don't buy any of this, and I'm concerned for Milwaukee that they're down 2 games, and now their starting point guard is resorting to this kind of thing. I mean, clearly Boston's in their head a little bit. Of course he knows who Terry Rozier is. Let's get that straight. He crossed him over really bad, made Bledsoe look, he almost fell down on the play. And Rozier really should have hit the game-winning 3 if it wasn't for the defensive breakdown by Jaylen Brown later in that, that little 0.5 second span there at the end. So of course Eric Bledsoe knows who Terry Rozier is. That's not the question. But for me, I think Milwaukee needs to be committed to figuring out what they're going to do to stop Terry Rozier rather than, okay, well, who is this guy first? I mean, I would probably need to know who he is before you can stop him, but they know, and they need to game plan for it. They do get a home matchup, these next 2 games, though, so they have the home crowd behind them, and it'll be interesting to see what they can do to try and stop Rozier and really Jason Tatum, who's having a phenomenal series as well.
Yeah, I don't think that the Celtics are going to be slowing down in Milwaukee. I feel like the Bucks are pretty much done right now, and same with the Wizards in the previous game, but, going into that final game on our slate is the New Orleans Pelicans and the Portland Trailblazers. So the Pelicans are up 2-0 on the Trailblazers. Steven, do you see the Pelicans as the team that can finish out the Trailblazers in a 4-game, sweep, or do you think the Trailblazers are going to come back?
Well, I think Portland can get 1 game in New Orleans, but if you're a Blazers fan, you have to be disappointed in their effort the first 2 games. Granted, they rely on Damian Lillard and CJ McCollum and really nobody else. So however they go, the team goes. But both times, just down the stretch in games, Lillard wasn't able to find the bottom of the net. And really, when you're relying on an undersized guard with a pretty big paint presence. If you're New Orleans, you've got Davis defending the rim, so you know that Lillard and McCollum are probably going to stay out on the perimeter. It makes it easy to guard, and when you've got a lockdown defender like Drew Holiday, who we'll talk about a little bit here in a moment, it makes things a lot more predictable for New Orleans, and so I think that over the course of this series, they'll find that out, and I think they'll be able to close out Portland, just not in 4 games, Robert. So I think Portland might steal a game or 2, but ultimately New Orleans looks strong, and really, unless the Pacers knock off Cleveland tonight, this is the only series that will be 2-0 in favor of the road team.
Well, when it comes to Portland as well, and more in particular Damian Lillard, he's letting Rajon Rondo, who has steadily declined over the past few years, get the best of him. Now, Rondo does have that championship and playoff experience, and yes, maybe there have been whispers of him returning to his old self, but I mean, something's wrong with Damian Lillard, and we don't know what that is at this time.
Yeah, Lillard certainly struggling here. Do you think the pressure is starting to mount because they really don't have a low post threat? I mean, if you think about it, going back a couple years, they had LaMarcus Aldridge to dump the ball down to. Now it's CJ McCollum right to his, right to the wing. So he doesn't really have that 1-2 combination. Nurkic is above average down low, but he's not the low post scorer, I think, that could take the pressure off of Lillard.
And with him injured, Nurkic injured, I think that the Trailblazers really need CJ McCollum and Damian Lillard to play to the best of their ability each and every night, which they're not going to be able to beat a Pelicans squad loaded with Anthony Davis, who had 22 points and 13 rebounds, Rajon Rondo, who flirted with a triple-double, and then Holiday being one of the best two-way guards in the league, as stated by Alvin Gentry as head coach.
Yeah, well, what do you guys think about that? Because, I mean, Drew Holiday's always been a solid player, but I don't necessarily consider him in the conversation for the best two-way player in the NBA.
I think that Gentry actually has a good point. Drew Holiday was very underrated in Philadelphia, and he didn't really get the attention he deserved. And like this year, for example, he's averaging a very quiet 19 points, 6 assists, and 4 rebounds per game. Well, 4.5, excuse me. And that's really not that bad for a guard. So when Gentry makes that statement, Drew Holiday really hasn't had a bad season. And I just don't think people are noticing quite as much as they possibly should. And given how he's played in this series, I think that they will start to take notice of that.
Yeah, I don't think Drew Holiday gets enough recognition for handling. I mean, because remember, Cousins, he's out with that Achilles injury, but before that, he had to do his own thing out in the backcourt and still get Davis and Cousins their looks, and they need a lot of looks per game. So being able to manage that is something that, like you said, Blake, goes unnoticed, and really he deserves praise. Now, I think more so Gentry saying and putting Holiday in the conversation for one of the best two-way players in the league is a bit of a stretch, but it's a nice pat on the back and well-deserved.
Yeah, and he said that he's the best, and without Kawhi Leonard, of course, on the court, but he's overlooking LeBron James, Kevin Durant, and, I mean, his own teammate Anthony Davis, all obviously better two-way players, but I think he just wanted Drew Holiday to get that recognition that he's been missing.
Yeah, he's overlooking a lot, and as a team, I mean, do we think if the Pelicans do get past Portland that they have a fighter's chance at advancing, more so in this NBA playoffs?
Well, if UMBC can take down a number one seeded team, then Portland, being a 3 seed, could be taken down by New Orleans, and New Orleans could advance and go pretty far. You never know with how March Madness turned out this year. I think anything can happen.
Yeah, it might be April and May Madness, but I just think the Pelicans could have a really good playoffs this season, especially with some West teams that, they look really good, obviously. They're in the West, but the Pelicans are looking even stronger, even without DeMarcus Cousins. And if they had that strong front court with Davis and Cousins, I feel like they would get even further. I'm not sure if Drew Holiday can fill that void, but, we'll see.
I would say that I am shocked at how successful they've been without Cousins. Really going to Portland, Moda Center's pretty tough place to play, loud. So, they're doing a good job so far. They have to keep it up, but we will find out when they return home for Game 3. But going back to the Eastern Conference and really talking about another underdog and a local favorite, the Indiana Pacers will play the Cleveland Cavaliers tonight in Game 2. Indy took the first one 98-80, so I want to hear your guys' thoughts on this one. We'll start with Robert.
Well, the Pacers held the Cavaliers to 80 points. That's hard to do in the playoffs. You're looking at really solid teams with good offenses to get to this point, and the fact that the Pacers stopped them to 80 points is phenomenal. And you get the rise of a lot of players like Victor Oladipo and the downfall of players like LeBron James, who is obviously looking at his next venture in the NBA. He might be going to Houston or Philadelphia. We'll get to that a different time, but I think the Pacers look really strong going through the rest of the series.
What the Pacers have going for them as well is, as we've said before, we know what we'll get from Victor Oladipo. He's the league leader in steals this season, and he's one of the top 10, I believe, now in NBA records for most games in a row with a steal. And also, Collison, the league leader in three-point shooting percentage over the Steph Curry. And also, when you look at it, the X factors for Indiana are Lance Stevenson and Miles Turner. Because, like I said, we know what we'll get from Oladipo. Lance Stevenson getting into LeBron's head, hitting him in the head, for that matter. And just Turner being able to step up his defense in the paint and holding Kevin Love to only 9 points. Those were two really big keys to the game that helped Indiana to that 18-point victory that we're all talking about today. And when it goes to the Cavs, if they could just control Oladipo and not let Stevenson be Stevenson, then they could have a chance and they could even steal a win and help gain their home court advantage back tonight. So that'll be something to watch and be interesting to see.
I think tonight's game will be the most pivotal game of the series. I watched, the entire Game 1, and I couldn't help but think, it seemed as though Cleveland was committed to waiting for a time in the game where Indiana wasn't controlling the pace. And that never happened. The entire time Indiana had pretty good defense, holding Cleveland to 80 points. I think the over-under on the game was 213, so it wasn't even close to that. It just speaks to the level of intensity Indiana showed on the defensive side of the ball. But, I mean, are they going to be able to hold LeBron down for a second game in a row? And that's going to be telling. I mean, Robert, what do you think? I mean, can they do it for 4 games? They're going to have to do it for 3 more now. Get Lance Stevenson going. Like Blake said, what you're going to get from Oladipo, but can they do it more?
I think they can, because LeBron doesn't have any support. He's never had support. And even with a big 3, he doesn't get a lot of play from his other players, and you need that going into a playoff series, and LeBron doesn't have that. That's why he wants to leave, and that Cleveland can't really do it for him anymore. So I think the Pacers can keep the pace and obviously beat the Cavs.
Well, no pun intended there. The Pacers keeping the pace, but I also see the major difference between Indiana and Cleveland is that Indiana's team chemistry is right there. It's near perfection. They have team dinners, for example, and every one of those guys is said to have shown up at those dinners, but when it comes to Cleveland, their team chemistry, as you can see, is not there. George Hill handling the ball at the point, and you see LeBron, he's just demanding the ball, jumping up and down, screaming for it. And that kind of gets under George Hill's skin, as you can see, just by watching. And those may be little details that go unnoticed, but come free agency this year, that may have an impact on LeBron staying or leaving.
Yeah, hey, if somebody's offering me a free dinner, you know where I'll be. So, I mean, that does help team chemistry, but not a very tough decision for any of those players. But you're right. Indiana definitely playing with more togetherness than Cleveland has. But at the same time, I would argue that the Cavaliers have seen a pretty big turnaround from the free agency deadline, where we were wondering if they were even going to make the playoffs. So still, Cleveland has a chance to come back in this series, but we shall see what happens tonight. Anybody have any predictions? Do you think Indiana steals a second game on the road?
I think the Pacers are going to have a little bit of a closer game, but I think they'll still take it. I don't think LeBron can overcome that.
It will definitely be a closer game, and as much as I hate to say it being the Pacers fan that I am, I think that LeBron James is not going to go down without a fight. I think that around the league, everybody's overreacting to that Game 1 win. Although Indiana did play very well, I don't see Cleveland going anywhere this quick, so I'm going to say Cleveland's going to take it with a 5 to 10 point margin tonight.
All right, sounds like a good prediction. I'm also going to go with Blake here. Sorry, Robert, you're outnumbered, but I do think that the Cavaliers will find a way to pull even in the series and take Game 2. We will be right back on the Fantasy Express in just a little bit, talking about the rest of the first round of the NBA playoffs and getting to the matchup in the West between the Jazz and Thunder. So stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Hi, this is Terry Crews, actor, former football player, and father of 5. I'm also an expert on drama. There's the good kind that comes with having a house full of kids, and there's silly drama like the drama around my percolating pectorals. And then there's the drama you can skip.
Skip the drama that comes with not having your high school diploma or equivalency. Find free adult education classes near you and finish your diploma. Visit finishyourdiploma.org. That's finishyourdiploma.org.
And lead the drama to actors like me.
Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ed Council.
Check out my new time machine.
Does it work?
Hit the button.
Hey, it's Napoleon.
Oui. Check out the future.
Hey, you have a nice house. Why don't I?
You didn't save any money, buddy.
If only there was a way I could go back in time and fix that.
Yeah.
Save something for the future. Put away a few bucks, feel like $1 million. For free ways to save, go to feedthepig.org. That's feedthepig.org.
This message brought to you by the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants and the Ad Council.
We're back on the Fantasy Express here in the WCRD studios. Once again, I'm joined by Robert Segovia and Blake the Hound Dog Dahlier. We're going to talk a little bit about the Jazz Thunder matchup. Oklahoma City took Game 1 at home. And first of all, to start this conversation, I want to know what both of you think about the Thunder, and specifically, is this a good matchup for them? Because to me, it seems like it is.
Well, I mean, I think that the Thunder are, looking like the better team. Jazz, they have Donovan Mitchell, but I don't think he's going to be able to overcome two amazing players, probably top 15 in the league for both of them. I don't know about Carmelo Anthony anymore, but, he hasn't been on the Thunder roster. But Russell Westbrook and Paul George are obviously the better players.
Yeah, Oklahoma City, now they have been referred to as the big 2.9, Carmelo being the 0.9. So that should say a little bit. But I do think, though, speaking to this particular matchup for the Thunder, although there's been doubters about how far they can go in the playoffs, I think of the other 7 teams that they could have pulled for the first round, the Jazz are the best matchup for them. You spoke to it, Robert, just a second ago. Donovan Mitchell, I mean, really, you want to name another impact scorer for Utah other than him, Blake?
Well, they do have Derek Favors and Rudy Gobert, who are pretty dominant in the post, but Steven Adams has been doing a pretty good job so far at controlling them. And another thing I want to point out is that Paul George must have heard that Victor Oladipo played well and wanted to prove something for himself with that trade. He scored 36 points, 7 rebounds. However, he did not rack up any assists. So, I don't know. Do you guys think he made Kobe Bryant proud?
Well, obviously, yeah. I mean, Kobe is watching that game and saying, well, Paul George is taking over my spot. He's the ball hog. Well, Russell Westbrook is also a ball hog, but he gets his assist for that triple-double mark. But yeah, Steven, what do you think about Kobe, Paul George comparisons from Blake?
Well, other than the joke being obvious with the no assists, I don't see much of a comparison. But no, yeah, Paul George, I mean, he, to me, is the most smooth player in the league. Just watching him play, he's like a gazelle out there. Whenever he's got the ball, I mean, he was 8 of 12 or 8 of 11 from 3-point range the first game. I mean, those numbers, he's got his jump shot down to a T, and that makes him so much more dangerous because he still has that ability to get to the rim.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about smooth players. I never really heard that before, talking about NBA shooters or players, but yeah, Paul George definitely fits the criteria when I think about smooth. He's the player that you go to and he's able to finish with a lot of precision, not a lot of effort. Same with LeBron James. It just comes to them. It doesn't look like they're working too hard to get those points.
Definitely not. And somebody else who's pretty good at being smooth driving through the lane, Russell Westbrook, who had 29 points, 13 boards, and 8 assists, once again flirting with that triple-double that he averaged for the second season in a row. And the keys to this game for our next matchup here, if you can shut down Donovan Mitchell and just control Gobert and Favors, then the Thunder aren't going to have anything to worry about because they have that core of Westbrook, George, and Anthony, the 0.9. And really, there's no stopping them when it comes to Utah because they're young, they're inexperienced, and the Thunder have really stepped up come playoff time.
No, yeah, 2 things that I want to add. First, Rudy Gobert, definitely a presence down low on the defensive end. Offensively, he's been offensively challenged his entire career, and I don't think he's turning a corner anytime soon. So that's one thing that I think Steven Adams can play to his advantage because I would say that Adams is more of a two-way player than Gobert will ever be unless he really commits to that offensive side of the ball. And then second, you mentioned Russell Westbrook being smooth. I don't know if there's one particular thing about Westbrook's game that is smooth. I think he's the Energizer Rabbit out there on the court. But, I mean, his statistics that he puts up on a nightly basis definitely, speak to his talent level. But I do see more so Westbrook and George as a nice 1-2 combo where Westbrook's the energy guy and George is there in late game situations to kind of calm things down and take those big shots. And then Melo, I don't know what his future is really going to be like with the Thunder.
Yeah, I don't think that Melo is a starter or role player anymore. I feel like he's getting to that point where he's becoming more of a bench player, going more towards his retirement. And if the Thunder can give him one last shot to, get to a pedestal and win a championship for the first time. I think Carmelo will definitely take that.
Right. We've seen the first game in this series, so I want to get some series predictions from you. So we'll start with Blake.
I'm going to go with the Thunder in 5 because overall they've proven to be the better team. Utah is very talented, so when they go back to Utah, I'll give them a game, but overall I don't see Oklahoma City going anywhere.
I see the Thunder winning in 4, sweep. A lot of sweeps this first round for me, personally. But, I think that the Jazz are going to make some very close games because Donovan Mitchell is going to play really well. And before I leave my thoughts for this game, I just want to get your guys' opinions on Donovan Mitchell and Ben Simmons and that Rookie of the Year talk. Do you guys think that Donovan Mitchell is deserving of that Rookie of the Year because he's an actual rookie, or do you think that Ben Simmons is the obvious Rookie of the Year?
See, that's a good point because obviously both of them have the eligibility, but Mitchell's the newer player in the league. We did touch on this topic a little bit last time, and I tended to side with Donovan Mitchell. I just think the impact that he has on his team, considering the fact that we really can't name, other than maybe Derek Favors, another go-to on the offensive side of the ball. And his impact is large on that team. If he wasn't there, Utah's winning games if they hold the opponent to 80 points or less, really, for me. So that's why I have Mitchell. I know, Blake, you think a little bit differently.
Actually, as I do think Ben Simmons has been the better player, I do have to agree with you guys on the one side of Donovan Mitchell actually being a rookie. And what really persuaded me to believe that over the past few days, it's been a recent change of thought for me, but he wore the sweatshirt sponsored by Adidas that said "Rookie?" ? And I think that was really clever, and I think he makes a good point. So I'd like to change my viewpoint on that a little bit.
All right. Way to go, Blake. I appreciate you being open to
jumping on the bandwagon.
Yeah,
if you will.
That's fine. As long as it's the Donovan Mitchell bandwagon, and I think he's very deserving of the award. But really, both guys are. It's just, are you a hardcore believer in, hey, this guy's the legitimate rookie? If so, I think Mitchell's the way to go. But another series we're going to move on to here next is the Timberwolves and Rockets, one that, like Robert said, he expects a lot of sweeps. It could result in something very similar with the Rockets playing the way that they are. However, we're going to have a pretty in-depth conversation about this series because I noticed a lot of things on both sides of the ball that I think could be improved come game 2 and the rest of the series that I really want to talk about. But right now, let's stick with initial impressions of game 1. And maybe, Robert, you can talk about some of the adjustments that Minnesota can make, leading into game 2.
Well, Minnesota really needs Tom Thibodeau to make some good matchups for Minnesota versus Houston, because Houston is the best team in the league. We know this. They had the best mark, best three-point shooting, even better than the Warriors. But what the Timberwolves need is a lot of good matchups for Karl Anthony Towns, Jimmy Butler, Andrew Wiggins. They have the players. They have the star talent. They just need to use that because the Rockets are absolutely dominating them.
Although the Rockets are pretty dominant, one thing that stood out to me was the margin of victory was only 3 points by the Houston Rockets at home. So granted, the Timberwolves may have only made the playoffs by the skin of their teeth, but they were close. They're right in there. So granted, I don't think they'll eventually win this series, but down the road, you've got to look at Minnesota and say they're doing some really good things out there, and they have a lot of potential here in the next 5 to 10 years for growth and maybe a championship in Minneapolis.
Yeah, and Minnesota is one of those interesting teams that has a lot of youth. And then you put a guy like Jimmy Butler, throw him into the mix with Jamal Crawford coming off of the bench. And, Robert, I see you have here Jimmy Butler. I mean, he came back. He tore cartilage in his knee. I mean, are you surprised he was even able to give it a go in game 1?
Well, I mean, yeah, I feel like Jimmy Butler has always been a fierce competitor in the NBA, even when he was on the Bulls, and Rose went down multiple times. Again, it's the Minnesota Bulls because Rose is over there too. Taj Gibson, Tom Thibodeau, Jimmy Butler. I feel like I'm watching the same team, which is why I root for them. But yeah, Butler had to come up for Rose many times in his career, and he's coming back again to avenge the Timberwolves and try and get them a playoff win. The Timberwolves haven't been in the playoffs for a long time, and the fact that they got there this year is a testament to their youth and veteran presence of Jimmy Butler.
And looking at the keys to this game, Houston needs to just stick with who they are, the three-point shooting, like you said, Rob, the best in the league, and their improved defense. They're not really the stereotypical James Harden defense anymore. And if you could let James Harden and Chris Paul work their magic, they're one of the best duos in the NBA, maybe even better than Lowry and DeRozan, who knows. But Minnesota, their keys to the game, if they could shut down this duo, they're going to be in for a wild ride because Karl Anthony Towns and Andrew Wiggins, they can dominate the paint, and if they do so, as in the process of shutting down the duo of Houston, then they could, pull off an upset. But like I said, Jimmy Butler's defense, his is there too, but I don't see that happening this year, and so I'm going to give it to the Rockets. But just those keys to the game may make this series a little more interesting than everybody is speculating at the moment.
Yeah, you just said it. I mean, with Minnesota, it's controlling the paint. I mean, that's their primary goal. You ask Tom Thibodeau that, it's controlling pace and paint. And so they are essentially a Bulls 2.0, a more experienced Bulls roster with upgrades at center, with Karl Anthony Towns being both an inside and outside scorer, pretty good defender, and Jeff Teague at the point guard. They are not using those particular pieces very well. There was many times Houston switches every single ball screen. So multiple times you had a Karl Anthony Towns on Harden or a Chris Paul. And we all know Tom Thibodeau's a defensive-minded coach. But that is not an excuse for not getting the ball down low. Every single time that kind of matchup is available. I mean, Towns, half of the time, he would just go out to the perimeter, and for whatever reason, Minnesota was more comfortable having Jeff Teague take one of Houston's bigs, whether it was Capella or even an Ariza, who's not really a big, but he's a very good defender, off the dribble one-on-one. Now, I think it's unanimous. I'm not even going to ask for the opinion here that you'd rather have Towns posting up Chris Paul than Jeff Teague taking Clint Capella one-on-one. And that's what's happening, and I'm afraid that this series will get away from Minnesota really quickly if they do not make that adjustment. It's already 1-0, and granted the margin was 3 the first time, but it's going to get worse if they can't make that adjustment. So, Robert, what do you think, and Blake, you could chime in here too, what do you guys think Minnesota should do about that situation? I mean, should it be, hey, if the matchup's there, great, or should they force it down into the post until Houston can prove that they can stop them?
Well, I think that Minnesota needs to take the matchup seriously, make it position against position. That's how it works in the NBA. I know that there's a lot of switches, especially with Harden and Paul being 2 point guards. Karl Anthony Towns is a great defender, but he's no Anthony Davis. He's not going to be able to get into the perimeter and get back to the paint fast like Davis does. I mean, Davis can have 2 arms in both areas, but Karl Anthony Towns is a little slower. So I think that Tom Thibodeau needs to focus on those matchups, get Minnesota back into, playing like they should, and I feel like Minnesota can actually steal a game, especially because it is a Bulls 2.0, and the Bulls usually in those previous matchups got 1 win and forced like a game 5.
As important as it is to pound the paint, if it's not working, you can't force it down there because then you're not going to win, and that'll be a recipe for disaster. So if the paint is obviously a good option with those 2 players, Karl Anthony Towns and his wingman, Andrew Wiggins, down there. But if it's not working, maybe try to work the ball around the perimeter, get some mid-range, maybe even some 3-point buckets going. I know with Jeff Teague, he's not exactly a lights-out shooter, but if he could maybe spread the floor a little bit, that may be beneficial to Minnesota as well.
Right, and it's a little frustrating for me to watch the game. I've watched every single playoff series, at least one of the games, and to me, the two most tentative teams out there are facing each other, and it's this matchup. Minnesota, was playing slow and a little hesitant. Houston was playing scared. I mean, both of those teams, it was like who was going to mess up, and that was who took game one, and clearly Minnesota was the team that down the stretch failed to score, and Houston was able to seal out that win. But really, both of these teams, to me, feel as though they're not really in the swing of things yet, and it'll be telling game 2 in Houston. So we'll look forward to that one. Let's get predictions once again for this series. Robert, you seen another sweep?
I think that Minnesota can take one game, especially with two-way players like Karl Anthony Towns and Jimmy Butler. I feel like that defense and offense can help them get at least one win.
Okay, Blake?
I think that Houston will probably take it. I'm going to say 6 games because, like you said, Steven, they're playing scared, and they will eventually. They're a more talented team, and they will come out on top. But I can see Minnesota potentially taking one on their home court up in Minneapolis, because if they can come back close in Houston, they could really do some damage at home, and that definitely is a factor that needs to be taken into consideration.
Yeah, something that worries me is, Houston's had this great regular season now, and the knock on them last year was, hey, they showed up against San Antonio, and they were there. They played a basketball game, but they really didn't, they weren't, their minds were not in it at all against the Spurs. So maybe they're kind of a Western Conference version of Toronto in a way. Got to get over that hurdle and prove to themselves that they can win. But I do see Houston taking this probably in 5, just because Minnesota, if they don't make those adjustments, it's not going to matter how scared Houston's playing. But I just mentioned the San Antonio Spurs. We left a couple series off of this discussion, and deservedly so. Miami and the 76ers are tied 1-1. That's kind of a series that not a lot of people are talking about. I feel as though the 76ers will be pulling away. Blake, do you kind of agree with me on that?
I do agree. I would take the 76ers in 6 or 7 games, because if Dwayne Wade can turn back the clock like he did the other night, I mean, that was something special, and the Miami Heat really had it going, and Philadelphia was frustrated. You can tell by their body language that they were not happy about what was going on, and their 17-game win streak ended. So I'm going to take the 76ers in 7 ultimately, because they have the home court advantage. But Dwayne Wade, he may be older. He may be 36 years old, but he still has a little bit of gas left in his tank, and he could carry that team a little ways.
Well, I didn't even know he was 36 years old, but yeah, I think Dwayne Wade is the X factor for the Heat, and you're right. I feel like it's going to be a little longer series than most, but the 76ers are ultimately going to take it because of Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid.
Yeah, I don't know how many close games we're actually going to get out of this series, which is a little disappointing, but it might extend a little bit longer than it should, simply because, the 76ers haven't been there. So they're going to lose out to the experience a couple of times in this 7-game matchup. Like Blake said, I don't know if it's going to go 7, but I think 6 is definitely a reasonable number, seeing as though, like you said, 76ers, they've got the talent. I mean, Ben Simmons, Rookie of the Year, and Embiid, hopefully he's got that eye situation taken care of, and eventually they should be able to win out. So I'm liking the 76ers. I'll go 6. And then the Spurs and the Warriors, I just mentioned San Antonio, not looking good for them, is it, Rob?
No, because the Spurs are playing a Warriors team that's back. They're playing with Kevin Durant at his absolute best, and you get a dominant figure like that, and then Klay Thompson to complement him on the three-point line. They're going to welcome back Steph Curry in the next series with a sweep of the Spurs.
Another thing with the Spurs is they look lifeless out there. They really don't have anything going for them. It hasn't even been close, and that's really unusual for a Greg Popovich coached team. So you even wonder, with Kawhi being out and We don't know why he's still out because that quad injury, he was cleared to play 2 months ago. Yeah. So where is Kawhi? Why isn't he playing? Or is he as good as gone?
You just hit on the biggest story in this series is Kawhi. I mean, Greg Popovich has given a couple interviews now about his availability, and it's clear that even Greg Popovich cannot overcome the Golden State Warriors. I mean, he's worked magic with rosters in the past. They don't have the talent without Kawhi in the lineup to compete, and it's really hard to see because you know as much as Popovich wants Kawhi back in the lineup, does he? Because I don't know if he's really going to be a team player when he gets back.
Yeah, I heard a couple months ago when that whole story came out that Popovich didn't want Kawhi back. The Spurs didn't want him back because he is as good as gone. I feel like with him working out in New York right now, he's getting some looks at different teams in the playoffs right now, and I feel like he's going to make a jump possibly at the Lakers, maybe get LeBron to join him. The Lakers squad could be really good next season, but I don't think he's going to return to the Spurs this playoffs.
Yeah, and you're not going to see him because they've got 2 more games, and then they're gone. Because I see Golden State sweeping this series, another Segovia sweep. I'll make that that phrase. But yeah, I just Golden State's got the superior talent. And where do we think that the Warriors will be once Steph comes back? Are they now the front runners, seeing as though Houston, if they keep up the way that they're going, still, is playing hesitantly?
Yeah, I feel like the Warriors are back to being the number one. I'm not going to say no doubt team to come out of the West because the Rockets are obviously, they've been the favorites all season, and the West is stacked with so many teams every single year. So I don't think they're a lock to go to the championship, but if injuries plague the Warriors like they have this season, then I don't think they can make it to the finals. If they have a healthy roster and play to the best of their ability like they have been in Game 1 and can get Steph Curry back, I think the Warriors are going to go back.
I think the Warriors kind of need to slam on the brakes here because Stephen Curry, granted, he's a very talented player, one of the best shooters, if not the best shooter in the world right now. He has had a history of ankle and knee problems that have hindered him. And granted, he did have a comeback. He came back and he played well for a few years. But it's appearing again this year that his ankles and knees just do not want to hold up. As soon as he gets back, he gets re-injured. So if he's healthy, I think the Warriors are a top contender. But then again, you just don't know because your ankles and knees as a guard with all the cuts you have to make, that's dangerous for Steph. And so we really don't know where he is, where he'll be when he comes back. And that's something to watch for and just to be cautious of if you're the Golden State Warriors.
Right, and if Steph is not a guarantee to be out on the court and Houston plays with nothing to lose, Houston scares me. They really have all the pieces if they're playing with a chip on their shoulder and trying to take down the giant Warriors. I think they could get it done. But that'll remain to be seen hopefully in later rounds of the NBA playoffs. But that wraps up our playoff discussion here on the Fantasy Express. We'll take a short break and be back for the final 8 or so minutes on the show and talk a little bit about the MLB. So keep it here on WCRD and we'll be right back.
My name is Meera. Many families have come to America for a better life. I advocate for these families with United Way to make the community stronger. I don't just wear the shirt, I live it.
Give, advocate, volunteer, Live United. Go to liveunited.org. Brought to you by United Way and the Ad Council.
In the small town of Elmira, New York, a boy was born into an all-American family. The odds of him achieving his dream in the fashion industry? 1 in 23 million. The odds of having a child diagnosed with autism? 1 in 68. I am Tommy Hilfiger, and my family is affected by autism. Learn more at autismspeaks.org/signs. Brought to you by Autism Speaks and the Ad Council.
Hey everyone, we are back with the Fantasy Express here on 91.3 WCRD, and I'm going to lead the baseball discussion for this last part of the show. And I was browsing the MLB page on ESPN. I saw a little bit of a comment from Anthony Rizzo from the Chicago Cubs, who is currently injured, but he said, quote, "We play too much baseball." And Rizzo wants a shorter season in the MLB. He's fine with taking a pay cut if it comes to that. And personally, I think that that's a perfect idea because I've been putting this in for years, saying that the MLB is too long, 162 games. Who wants to watch 162 games? I keep up with all of them, but I'm not going to watch all of them. I can't currently because I'm at Ball State and we don't get all the coverage. But what do you guys think about Rizzo's comments? Do you feel that that Rizzo's right in saying that there's way too many games and then making the season start a little later than April? Because there's been a lot of postponements this season. And April has been a really dreary month with cold weather, rain, postponing games. So do you guys think it should start in May and end a little sooner?
I agree because, well, and Rizzo makes a good point. He says, you know, he'll take a pay cut, which shows a lot of character on his part, first of all. But if you were to shorten up the season, that would make season ticket packages more affordable. And if you were to make those packages more affordable, then maybe more people would go to these games. I know because of the cold, I believe it was a White Sox game, only had approximately 900 some people there. And that's not very good. I mean, that's very few people. And could you imagine, for example, if the NFL had 162 weeks of football in a season? Well, that'd be a bit ridiculous, wouldn't you think?
Yeah, the physicality of the NFL is certainly the reason why they don't have 162 games in a season. That's quite obvious. But I would say, you know, you make a good point comparing those two things because to me, 162 games is a lot. And as an MLB fan, I'm currently wearing my Kyle Schwarber jersey. I don't know if I want to watch a team play when their first baseman thinks they shouldn't be out there for 162 games. I'm not saying he's not giving full effort, but you know what kind of mindset is he in? And that makes me question. Well, you know, I want to see the passion of October baseball. I think that's what every baseball fan lives for, and that would be exciting to see. Maybe the only way that we can get that throughout the regular season is to shorten it. By how much? I don't know. Robert, you have an idea of maybe the number?
I'd love to see an 81 game season, and which would start maybe, you know, closer to that All-Star break in July. I'd love to see July to September baseball. You know, play that All-Star game right before the season starts, and then that could be like a leading into the rest of the season game. But before that All-Star game, you could have some spring training baseball, but not spring training. It would be summer training. From June to mid-July, you would have some summer baseball and then play into the 81-game season that takes us into October baseball. And that would be a really tight, you know, watch. You don't need to see the Cubs play the Cardinals in 4 series. I don't want to watch that. If the Cubs have the lead over the Cardinals, you know what you're going to get. And that's the thing. Going into maybe like August or September, you already have a good idea of what these teams bring.
Right. And well, I was also thinking that maybe the around the 80 mark is a little less. I mean, just down from 162. I don't know those hardcore baseball fans. I don't think that's going to. I was
being a little.
That's going to happen. But you know, I could see maybe starting the season now and going, you know, through however many games that would be. This seems like a good time frame, but you know, the Cubs game's postponed again tonight, so they won't be playing. And Rizzo did make a comment about the Cardinals and Cubs series. When everybody thinks of that rivalry and that matchup, they're thinking of, you know, Saturday baseball at Wrigley Field, sun shining, 75 degrees, winds blowing out. And it has not been the case at all in this series. They haven't really even been playing. They played last night. It was frigid temperatures. Cardinals, defeated the Cubs. But and then on another note, really, Rizzo, man, he's been pretty vocal so far to start the season. He's talking about the shortening of the MLB season. Plus, he blamed his hotel bed for his back problems. Anybody have anything to say about that? Because that, to me, it's a little much.
Well, I mean, my bed, you know, gives me back problems every single day, and Rizzo gets quality treatment as a Major League Baseball player, especially a star. So I think you should just, you know, lock it up and play baseball.
I think the short, sweet season would be beneficial. It benefits you economically, the players physically, And it may even lead to some more exciting finishes to the games. Who knows? I mean, if they have more energy, if they have more passion, that may speed up the pace of the games, which I know has been an issue lately. And so I think it's definitely worth a try. And there's nothing to lose and everything to gain if you were to just try it for a year. Because let's be honest, the MLB regular season drags on and on and on. I say give it a try. We've got to do something out there.
Oh, it's clear that Anthony Rizzo and the Cubs did not stay at a Holiday Inn Express. That is for sure. So we'll see. But the Cubs are struggling for the first part of the season. The games that they have played that haven't been either colded out or rained out, and so are the Nationals and the Dodgers. Really big names, teams that are having their fair share of difficulties.
Yeah, the Nationals and Dodgers and Cubs. Oh my. Yeah, what's going on with the National League? In the NL East, you have the New York Mets at 12-4, the Phillies from Philadelphia at 10-6, and the Atlanta Braves at 9-7, all 1, 2, 3 in that Eastern Division. And then the Nationals are in fourth, sitting at 500. What do you guys think about the Nationals? Are they, kind of struggling to start off the season, and they're going to get back into things, or do you think this NL East could favor the Mets and the Phillies?
Well, they are definitely not exactly having the start they'd want to, but I think a comeback's inevitable. And I mean, it is that series, well, that division in particular seems a bit uneven in terms of power teams compared to other divisions. I mean, their competition is so thick, and you look at another division anywhere in the National League, and it's just not even close to that. So I would definitely say a rebound, and uneven in that division for sure.
Yeah, the Mets are a team that I have my eye on if they can again stay healthy with their pitching.
Yeah.
Matt Harvey, he's done. I mean, he's seen his better days, and it's not even close. But DeGrom and Syndergaard, of course, if those guys remain in the rotation for the entire season with Mickey Callaway, pitching specialist, taking over as manager, they could pose a threat to the Nationals. But you look at the Nationals roster, they still don't have Daniel Murphy. Bryce Harper's hit 8 home runs already. One he just broke his bat the other day and hit one out over 400 feet. You got people talk about how Mike Trout's the best player in the game. I think we need to take a step back from that after seeing Mr. Harper's strength. But Bryce, fantastic player. Trey Turner has yet to get it going, but he's another young, promising star at shortstop. And you've got the veterans, Ryan Zimmerman, and now I hate to say it, but it seems like just last year, Strasburg was pitching his first game for the Nationals against Pittsburgh with I think he had 14 strikeouts in that game. And now here we are. He's almost turning 30. So an aging pitching core, but still one at the top of their game. I don't see Washington faltering. If you extend the season out and project it for the next couple of months, I think they'll be at the top of their division, but battling with the Mets. And the Dodgers are another team you talked about in the National League that there's question marks. Kershaw's been pitching well, but for me, Kenley Jensen, he's had 4 save opportunities, blown 2 of them, and he really doesn't seem to care about it. He's had interviews where, hey, what's going on? And he's like, oh, it's just a game in, April or March. It doesn't really matter. It's like, well, yeah, it does. So are you concerned about that at all?
Well, the Dodgers, the West isn't exactly like the best division. I mean, yes, they have the Diamondbacks, but other than that, I don't think the Rockies are going to be able to hold that 11-8 mark and be able to carry it throughout the season. The Padres are nowhere to be. They're probably going to be 30 games back of everybody. But, the Dodgers really have to worry about the Diamondbacks. I think the Diamondbacks have the potential to be the first place team the whole season. They have a talented roster, but I think that the Dodgers should be able to make it back to second and get in that wild card spot. They're not in a bad position when you compare it to the other divisions, but especially in the West with the Diamondbacks, I think that's going to be tough for LA.
Right, and the one team that wasn't said was the Giants. They're relying on 30-plus-year-old talent. I don't think that that's going to get the job done if the beginning of the season is any predictor going forward. But that's enough about baseball. I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more next week about it. It'll be our last show on the Fantasy Express. We'll have a big one as it is the night before the NFL Draft. The first round of the NFL Draft will begin next Thursday. We'll be here Wednesday night at 6 o'clock. Getting that all set for you. Probably have make up some big boards and give our opinions on some of the top picks. But we do have one NFL note to close the show. Blake, take it away. The mic is yours.
Well, to end this show, we're going to talk about this day in history, in NFL history. 20 years ago today, in the year 1998, quarterback Peyton Manning was drafted with the first overall pick of that 1998 NFL draft. And it's funny because he tells his story, how between him and Ryan Leaf being the big debate, and he goes into the room with Colts operator Bill Polian, and he says, "I am going to kick your blank for the next 15 years if you don't pick me." And, well, the rest is history. Peyton was picked by the Colts. He won him a Super Bowl, MVP trophies, countless records, and the rest, that's history, folks.
Yeah, it's amazing how vulgar Peyton Manning can get, man. I'm telling you, he was right. Bill Polian listened to him, and exactly, the rest is history. But I think the Colts have other issues now 20 years later, picking 6th overall in the draft and really hoping that Andrew Luck's shoulder is healthy again. So quite a lot has evolved since then, but we'll be back next week on the Fantasy Express talking mostly NFL draft and maybe sprinkle in a little bit of baseball towards the end of the show. So thank you for listening. For Robert Segovia and Blake the Hound Dog Dollier, I will never forget the Hound Dog, by the way. I like that. And Steven Sobek, you've been listening to the Fantasy Express on 91.3 WCRD, and we will be back next week. Thanks for tuning in.